if you look at the explanation that you mentioned, and I'm not saying that it's the one that you believe in, but you mentioned it, that the raids were about effectively reclaiming the equivalent of the losses by taking from the Meccans, the equivalent of what had been taken from them. That's really problematic in that it's not found in any of the sources of Sirah. It's a very modern interpretation. And so if you look in the books of Sirah from the 800s and 900s, the classical period of Sirah, you cannot find that explanation anywhere. And it doesn't make sense. I'll tell you why. Because the raids weren't only against the Quraysh, and then the raids weren't also only done by the Muhajirun. They were also done by the Ansar as well against the Quraysh and other caravans. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, it was about getting the lost value back. And secondly, if that's the logic, fair enough. If it is, and you want to stick with that, by some time after the Battle of Badr, let's say by the year 4 Hijrah, the Prophet had amassed so much wealth from campaigns, from raids and battles, that he had already gained more than they had lost during the Meccan period. And yet the raids continued, right till the end of his life, in fact. And so even that doesn't kind of hold water. So why did it happen? And the answer is because that's what did happen in 7th century Arabia. That was somewhat expected. If you think about the Prophet, peace be upon him, gets an ummah developing that's largely from people from the Bedouins. It starts off as being city dwellers and urban peoples, but it sucks in more and more and more and more of the peoples around. These are people where raiding is their central activity. It's their sense that this is the purpose of life. And the Prophet is saying, right, but now do it fi sabilillah. Now do it for the cause of Allah. And they were, okay, we understand that. And so it's a very tricky thing to explain. And I'm not saying that my explanation is the right one, but I do believe there's something to be said for the fact that it was the recognizable form of wealth distribution in Arabia, that there was enormous esteem attached to raiding, social esteem. It was also a way of enriching or strengthening a quality of life at a time of fairly widespread subsistence or even poverty. There's things that we often aren't looking at when we look at this issue of why raids occurred. And as I mentioned, once a friend of mine said to me, but this is only going to make an enemy of the people you raid. How are they going to receive that? My answer is they're already your enemy. And what you're doing is demonstrating power against an enemy. And the purpose of it is to create a buffer zone around Al-Medina. We're trying to grow this thing, this new thing, Islam. You need it to survive. And so pushing people away through these raids, demonstrating force, a show of force, sending your men out to do these things that teach them those qualities that you want them to have in a recognizable fashion. For the Arabs looking around saying, I get what's going on here. To me, that's at least, if not the whole explanation, that's a partial explanation. And there's no wrongdoing. It's a socially esteemed activity in Arabia. Now we see things differently.